Kingdom Come Deliverance II can be brutally unforgiving. You'll need to eat, sleep, armor up, gear up, save often, and think carefully about everything you say and do in order to brave the constant hardships that 1403 has in store. Luckily, there's plenty of hidden treasures to be found both around Trosky and Kuttenburg that can transform Henry from a lowly peasant into a wealthy and formidable warrior. So sit back and relax, maybe with a German wheat beer, as we check out 25 hidden free gifts in Kingdom Come Deliverance II. First up, in a small woodland between Troskowitz and Takov, left off the road, we can find an old overgrown dugout, seemingly the former abode of a blacksmith, with the loot inside comprising of an apron, some smithing materials, and most importantly, the crafting recipe for the executioner's axe. Forged from a combo of iron and Toledo steel, this thing does some of the strongest slashing damage of all axes in the game, and is well worth grabbing earlier on, as we can craft it at the forge in Takov once we've found some Toledo steel. Plus, we now have an apron to wear, so we can look the part of a smith at the forge as well. For those of us more opting for the ranged combat route though, here's where to find a literal archery starting kit, and you can pick this up more or less as soon as the prologue ends, and we get free reign of the world. Just come northwest of Troskowitz, shortly before the road splits into a V, and just to the right here is a target on a tree. Someone clearly comes or came here for archery practice, and literally stored all their kit here too. We're talking arrows, a dogwood village bow, some bowman's brew, and even a skill book on archery, which we can read the next time we need to pass some time. Plus, to keep our starting gear in good condition, there's even a marksman's kit. And if you really are finding this early on in the game, I'd actually recommend taking some practice shots yourself at this target. The way arrows drop and the movement caused by Henry's breathing patterns take a little bit of figuring out, so it's worth doing not in the heat of combat to begin with. If you're after a simple, nice handful of groschen, as well as some light valuables to boost our charisma or sell for more groschen, look no further than a small hillock just north of the Zhelejov Wagoners Inn. Across the bridge, just out the back, be careful of this camp by the road. It very often has 3 or 4 bandits waiting to attack you, but head just up the stream to the right of it, and then left up this hill slightly until you see a tiny crack in the rocks, and inside it, a sack. It'll show up as a discovered point of interest, but only once you get very close. On top of groschen, there's also Savior Schnapps, which you want to remember to use when casually exploring, so as to avoid progress loss should you accidentally die. But the best thing here is a golden cross with garnets. Valuable, yes, but also granting us a +3 charisma boost when worn. So make sure to equip that, especially when interacting with NPCs. And once you've found this, if you're feeling brave, there's also a small bandit camp a stone's throw away up here. Just maybe drink one of the Savior Schnapps before giving it a go. All of this exploring can make for hungry work though, and if you want to stave off Henry's constant remarks that he's feeling quite hungry, there's a couple more places you want to visit alongside the lake next to Zhelejov. Around the same time Henry arrived in this region, one of the merchants in Troskowitz was transporting a caravan of goods to sell for an upcoming wedding in Samin. Unfortunately, his horse veered off the road and the cart fell into the pond, scattering the supplies with it. Tragic for the merchant, but a salvaging opportunity for Henry. Just returning to the place northwest of Zhelejov Wagoners Inn, carefully bypassing that camp along the road, then coming to the edge of the pond, and alongside some cabbages is a more valuable crate containing Savior Schnapps and enough dried beef to tie us over for several days. Sadly, we can't get to the baskets deeper into the pond, as despite swimming during the intro, Henry still actually can't swim. But if you want to wash down what we do have, then you can head to the top of these rocks above to find more Savior Schnapps and an assortment of booze to be consumed with a pretty nice view. But all this food is making me feel quite hungry as well. Luckily, in 2025, we don't have to go scouring the countryside for that though. In fact, we literally don't have to go anywhere, thanks to today's video sponsor HelloFresh, who deliver everything you need to cook healthy and delicious meals straight to your door, all pre-portioned with easy to follow instructions. I must have ordered hundreds of meals from HelloFresh the last couple years. I literally have a recipe book's worth of recipes here, and there's a couple simple reasons why I keep coming back. Number one, I don't have to think of a meal to cook. Aside from choosing from their selection of over 50+ meals every week, I know exactly what I'm having, exactly how to make it, and have all the ingredients that I need. So that means no impromptu shopping trips where I end up buying a bunch of snacks that I don't need, and it helps me structure my meal plans for the whole week. Number 2, I've learned so much about cooking from all these different recipes the past few years. The easiest way to learn is definitely by doing, and HelloFresh give you the opportunity to cook a huge variety of delicious meals. And 3, they're delicious. So much flavour goes into each of these dishes, and to be honest, now I just want to sit and enjoy this. And it's no longer just dinner that'll be sorted. Right now, HelloFresh are offering free breakfast for life whenever you order a box in the US. That and 10 free meals when you buy through my link and code down in the description below, or by just scanning that QR there. You can cancel or skip weeks whenever you like, so it's well worth checking out. Next up is another buried treasure chest in the northwest of Trosky, nearest to where the quest with Gamekeeper Verstatek takes place. At the very top of the upper part of Vidlak Pond is a locked, washed-up chest. Mutt gets the credit for finding this one for me, so bear in mind when exploring that his barking generally means he's found something interesting. Now, this thing is a hard lock to pick, and you may struggle earlier on in the game, especially if you're using a controller. I actually revert back to the mouse and keyboard for picking locks, since I think you have a lot more control with it. Though, there is actually a key for this chest. If you do complete the nearby quest for Gamekeeper Verstatek, we'll be tasked to recover his horse from a nearby camp of Vidlak bandits. It's definitely a tougher fight for the early game. You're probably best off luring them out one by one, but their armored up leader has both a map and the key to this chest. See, originally, they buried their stash under a tree, which this thing leads to, but after the tree fell down, the chest was then washed downstream. And now, if we dealt with the bandit camp accordingly, this actually just becomes a very generous extension of their loot. Golden crucifixes, especially, are some of the most valuable items to sell in the game. If you were able to take on that entire group of bandits, then this next treasure should be a breeze, given it just involves defeating one guy and his dog. Camped directly south of the Zhelejov wagon is in, southwest of Zhelejov itself is the Thief's Camp. Now, you may definitely want to get Mutt back before heading here to deal with the dog, or obtain the Dog's Best Friend perk, to stop the dog barking at your presence and helping you take down the thief more easily. This guy had seemingly robbed a small cart by his lonesome, and the chest here contains some decent loot. More importantly though, is the set of armor that the guy is wearing. Somewhat basic by later game standards perhaps, but it is more or less a complete set of pieces for Henry to have, and trade out as and when we find better ones. It won't protect us from everything, but will be enough to stop us dying from a couple sword strokes, so well worth obtaining early. Also, this guy drops a Saint Antiochus die, which always lands on a 3. We'll get on to why that's very important in a little bit. Though, whilst armor is important in Kingdom Come Deliverance II, there'll be plenty of times you're called upon to wear something a little more refined. The garb of the nobility, understandably, can run up pretty expensive though, so here's where to obtain a full set of fancy clothes completely for free. Directly south of Troskowitz is the hilltop fortress of Nebakov, and below it, Nebakov Mill. Head to the mill, and then east along the pond until about here on the map. Down the hill to your right will be a crashed two-wheeler that ran off the road apparently many years ago. At least that's the way it seems from the now skeletal remains of presumably the guy who fell down here, and rather than wade through a few inches of water back up the hill, he instead seemingly locked his best clothes in this chest, and then holding nothing but the key, sat down and died in this very spot. Or at least things looked that way, but at any rate, we now have the apparel required for events like the Semine wedding. To the north of Trosky Castle, there's a few points of interest worth checking out, including a hermit alchemist named Barnaby, from whom we can obtain poison recipes, and a camp of a couple of vagabonds, making him feel very uneasy near his home. Something very obscurely tucked down in these rocks below their camp, though, is a little shrine. These can be found in various places across the game, and with the Fundamentals of Theology perk, we can actually pray at these, granting Henry additional mental fortitude, rescuing us from mortal injury, and restoring 25% of our health. However, this shrine in particular has something more. By pushing the cross aside and I suppose desecrating it, we'll actually uncover some pages from the Bible. Henry can read these whenever is convenient, just like any other skill book, and doing so can bolster our scholarship skill a little further. Pretty tucked away this one, but definitely worth picking up if you head up here to visit the alchemist. For the next 2 entries, you'll want to head back to where this game began. On the northwestern rocky side of Rockwater Pond, we'll have to crawl through some crevices and do some parkour in order to get these next treasures. Firstly, as we get in here, these central lower-lying rocks can be accessed by carefully walking up and then across a log. Definitely drink a Savior Schnapps before attempting this, as these things are all too easy to fall off. Then, you'll have to jump across and down to the next rock along, and hidden away down here is a skeleton with a treasure. Presumably this was some former thief who made away with a haul of valuable jewelry and cups, though perhaps they were injured when making their way into these rocks, thus eventually dying with their stash of loot still in hand. At least now, in Henry's hands, it can finally serve someone once again. Heading further into this rocky maze now, you'll want to make your way towards the tallest, pointiest rock you can see, finding a perilous path behind, heading up to the top. This thing is named the Devil's Finger, tempting mere mortals into potentially losing their lives in an attempt to scale the small, jaggedy peak. Again, perhaps consider making another hard save here, though in fairness, I'd say the last parkour challenge had a higher chance of going wrong. If you do make it to the top of this thing, then there'll be a hefty stash of groschen and a pretty nice view. So a dagger is something you're always going to want to carry with you, unless perhaps you're attempting a fully pacifist run. But why settle for a simple run-of-the-mill dagger when we can instead wield the exquisite piece of Otto von Berghoff himself? In von Berghoff's chambers at the western end of Trosky Castle, laying simply on his table by the fire is a unique dagger named Ockham's Razor, said to be capable of ridding the world of superfluous entities and retaining only the most essential, God. Since daggers don't really do much aside from execute stealth kills though, there isn't really a stat difference here, but it is slightly lighter than your standard dagger, so worth carrying for that reason alone. Plus it's super easy to obtain, though if it's not here when you come to search, maybe wait for a point later on in the story. This next one can be found towards the end of the chapter in the Trosky region, so minor spoiler warnings ahead for that. At the end of the act though, we'll have to make our way out of Trosky via a secret tunnel. Now, whilst there is a definitive route which we can just follow along with the other characters, it's definitely worth exploring every additional passageway that you come across. One right turn at the beginning appears to be the bottom of a well. You'll see it by the dangling bucket here. Look very carefully on the floor though, and we can pick up the Gold Emperor's Badge, a powerful addition to our dice set, which can triple the value of any 111 dice combination, boosting its point value from 1000 to 3000. And if you haven't got one already, it also ensures you have a golden dice badge to begin with. We can wager these against certain other top dice players across the world in order to win their gold badges from them as well. Though do be careful when doing this, as losing the dice game will also mean losing our wagered golden badge. Fortunately, thanks to the game's differently weighted dice, there's a few ways to always ensure victory when playing. Remember the St. Antiochus die, which I mentioned earlier? Well, this is the only dice in the game absolutely guaranteed to land on the same number, always a 3. Of course, one of those by itself is fairly useless, detrimental in fact, given we're removing a die's chances of landing on a 1 or a 5. But where it gets powerful is after we obtain 3 or more of these things. With that, you're guaranteed to land a set of 3 3s with every full roll, and if you can get it up to the full 6 dies in the set, you literally can't lose. You'll never go bust. Or you could combine it with something like odd dies and weighted dies to almost never go bust. But the most reliable one is the St. Antiochus die, and you should always use as many of them as you have. But where to reliably get them? Well, in all likelihood, you will naturally find these if you play through enough quests, but speedrunning the process can simply be done in the starting village of Troskovitz. At the inn that we initially go to, around this corner here is a dice player, and by pickpocketing one of his pouches, I can't actually tell which one it was, but I did this from the left side, he'll have a St. Antiochus die. If you're struggling to do this in broad daylight, then you may have better luck at nighttime. Then just wait a few days and repeat the process again until you have as many as you need. Hell, we can even test out our new set of unlosing dice on this very man. And as you can see, even with 4 Antiochus, an odd, and a weighted, we're almost always able to repeat our rolls. And now, you can travel the world finding dice players, getting rich, and winning all the other badges without having to worry much about losing. We'll move on to the Kuttenburg region shortly, but first, just briefly, let's head back to those tunnels that we used to leave Trosky Castle at the end of Act 1, because further along these winding passageways, about the same time you reach a ladder sending you down and out, there's an additional passageway to a cave under Trosky, and in here are 2 bottles of I think the most valuable alcohol in the entire game, though comment below if you found something better. Ancient moonshine has apparently been lying here since the days Trosky Castle was built, and is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, allegedly. As such, these bottles will sell for 972 groschen each, or you can hoard them as a unique keepsake. Though that's not all that's in this cave. There's also a hard-to-pick chest containing a generous handful of groschen, though still worth less than the moonshine, as well as some Frankfurt steel, some cobwebs, and some charcoal. Moving on to the now larger region of KCD2 containing Kuttenburg, but when we first arrive here, we'll actually be in the fortress of Zuchtol. And if you want a quick and easy 500 groschen at the start of Act 2, then head out of here at some point and follow this path to the north. Then turn east when reaching the stream until you come across a point of interest marked Overgrown Quarry, where a villager can be found lying dead with an unfortunately soaked map. In fact, it was even more unfortunate for them that they died here, as it would seem they were only moments away from the treasure they sought. If we scale these large steps here and come to this little urn pot thing at the top, there'll be a very nice 500 groschen stashed away for us to spend on Kuttenburg goods. Now, troughs are one of the quickest ways to immediately freshen up, washing our face and any blood off of the clothes we're wearing. Though they can become a whole lot more useful than this from level 10 onwards with the right perk. At level 10, the perk next to godliness will become available in the vitality tree, and it allows us to heal 10 points of health every time we use a bath, or pay for the basic bathhouse package, plus heal 25% faster if sleeping whilst clean. What the perk doesn't tell you though, is that it also enables troughs to be used an infinite number of times in quick succession, which essentially gives us these free healing spots to fully heal up in every civilized corner of the world. Bleeding without a bandage? Not a problem, just ride over to the nearest respectable home and keep healing up until you can find those bandages. Only it's not a method that will actually heal injuries, you'll still need the bathhouse services for that. But for just washing our clothes, you can also keep an eye out for these little piers over larger bodies of water. Here, provided we have some soap, we can actually wash any of the clothes we have on us very easily, and with very little time passing as well. So as you get on a little ways into the game, the bathhouses, whilst still definitely useful, do kind of lose their monopoly on cleaning and healing. Now, let's be real, guns in medieval times did not make for very efficient weaponry. I kind of love how long they take to reload for the historical accuracy here, but it does somewhat destroy their viability. Though, if we are fighting a heavily armored foe, one accurate or lucky shot can spell an easy victory. Just the one victory though, then we'll probably need a faster working weapon. Though, the pistol we're introduced to is not the only gun we can obtain in KCD2. The hook gun is a much more massive hand cannon-esque weapon to be used at even closer range than the pistol. And here's where to obtain 5 of them. Directly east of Rabosch, down by the river, we can find a drowned wagon with a very hard-to-pick lock. Luckily, the skeletal remains of the former driver can be waded across to for the key, and inside are 5 of these crazy weapons along with shots and some blacksmith kits, which won't help with repairing these guns, but are still useful to have nonetheless. This next one is as much a reference as a gift, I suppose, but there's also a bit of a warning to go with it. So a little northeast from our drowned wagon of guns, into the forest, we can find a small cottage in the woods. There's a cutely adorned table here with 1 big seat and 7 little ones, which first made me ask, where the hell are all the children in this game? But after looking inside the cottage to also find 7 little beds and a woman laying dead with a bitten apple, I realized exactly what I'd stumbled into. It's a Snow White reference, and being this close to the map, Henry's remarks here make the whole scene even more sinister.
I should go back.
Though Warhorse went a little further than simply laying out this scene. See, if we pick up the bitten apple and eat the rest of it for ourselves, we will also suffer the effects of a lullaby potion, depleting our energy to 0 and actually annoyingly disabling fast travel until we sleep. It's a fair ride back to the Devil's Den, and in this condition, you may even fall off your horse and pass out. So head here and check it out. It's a really cool little Easter egg, but whatever you do, don't eat the poison apple. Hell, even when you do manage to sleep, it still takes several hours to recover any energy at all. And it makes me wonder, is the Snow White here actually dead, or just in a deep slumber? I would hope for her sake that someone eventually comes to rescue her, but apparently that would be weird. As we make our way closer to Kuttenburg, there's several bandit camps dotted about the place, and one you definitely want to go and clear out on your way can be found west of Old Kutna. These guys have a decent bit of armor, though with the level of loot and wealth we've acquired up to this point, so should we. So taking the guys out and heading into this shack, we can loot a chest containing a decent supply of potions, and most importantly, the crafting recipe for the shell hunting sword. At this point in the game, I was more or less just using a longsword, to be fair, but if you do still want to wield a one-handed sword, then this will likely beat whatever you were using back in Act 1. Though the better loot still is over in the other hut. Locked inside a very hard chest, though I think I picked up the key from the bandit leader, we'll get a full 1200 groschen, a master handgun this time, a Krakowian saddle which has an incredible horse carrying capacity, as well as a skill book for horsemanship itself. Just north of the Old Lota fast travel, also northwest of Malashov, is the ruin of Rabstein Mill. Now, fair warning, you should probably only come here when you're fairly armored up as well, as this place is very much crawling with bandits or guards. Though, to be fair, when I came here, which was around early morning, more than half of them were dressed in so little that it didn't actually feel right to be fighting them off with a sword. Even still, dispatch the bandits and take a good look around. There's several decent chests to loot around here, though by far the most useful is the one right in the middle of the bottom floor of the ruin. See, this has been repurposed into some sort of alchemy lab used for brewing as many poisons as potions, and this chest appears to be the storage unit for most of what they produce. So make sure to grab all that up, but also make especially sure not to miss this interesting concoction over on the corner table, simply labeled Strange Potion, with a big old skull to give you confidence that it's safe to drink. Actually, it's not safe to drink, not at all. Whatever was in this thing will very quickly kill you unless you drink a digestive potion shortly after, which can also usefully be found right by this one. Though you still want to drink the strange potion anyway, because once dispelling the initial deadly effects, it will unlock a new survival perk called Steak Tartar. See, the strange potion also seemingly gave us a completely iron stomach for the rest of time on its way through, and now, should we find ourselves in a pinch with nothing but raw meat to eat, we can consume it without fear of poisoning. Useful perk and worth having. As warfare technologies began to advance in the early 15th century, two Kuttenburgers one day got into a debate over whether or not the crossbow would ever replace the bow as a better weapon. Katerad of Loretz had written a book on why the bow would always remain superior, and marksman Albrecht wrote a book saying the exact opposite, that the crossbow would eventually win out. To decide who was correct once and for all then, the two agreed to meet, possibly at high noon south of the city, for a sharpshooter duel. Putting up a wager totaling 500 groschen, they marked out a central line, and each walked from it a set number of paces before opening fire. And the result was incredibly interesting, with both men appearing able to not only get off, but also land a good few shots in one another before both finally succumbed to their injuries. Their passions for respective marksmanships not able to quite overcome mortal injuries. Anyway, now that they're both dead, who else is gonna look after their literary works, weapons, and wager money than Henry of Skalitz, who just happened upon this scene one quiet medieval afternoon. After discovering that very interesting duel though, don't miss another tragic encounter not too far directly west of it. The silver mines of Kuttenburg are what gave the city its wealth, and I guess one man thought he'd struck gold, silver, when he found a mine that was no longer being attended. So, having made camp outside, that man headed into this now very perilous mine, and was actually able to retrieve some left behind 700 groschens worth of silver nuggets. But tragically, on his way out, the disturbances bushes he probably caused triggered the cave entrance to collapse just a couple seconds too early, crushing the man, but ironically leaving his pouch of silver nuggets just within arm's reach for us. Again, he's not exactly gonna need him anymore, so, you know. The monks of Sedletz Monastery are meant to be a disciplined bunch, though at least one of them seemingly isn't all too concerned about keeping his vow of chastity. At the southwestern wall of the monastery, in the bushes, we can find a hidden ladder, along with a medium-locked chest containing the clothes of a well-dressed man and a map to a barn, literally just across the water. The accompanying key will then open up said barn to reveal the lover's nest, containing a skill book and some strong lion perfume. Clearly, this monk was in the habit of sneaking out of the monastery, masquerading as a wealthy burgher, and rendezvousing with some lady friend wherein the two would partake in activities involving hay bales and, smoked sausage. I wonder, in fact, which monk it is. Kuttenburg, being the biggest settlement in the game, is naturally home to many hidden treasures and loot, many of which can actually be found in the old mining tunnels below the city. These can be accessed from inside most of the shops around, but here's a specific route to get directly into one of the wealthiest stashes. You'll want to come to this tailor shop, more or less in the center, the upper of the two, and inside, further back on the right, is the entrance to the old tunnel system. Follow the passage along into the mine shaft until you come to a set of ladders, which you'll want to head up first to immediately come upon a huge stash of armor, weapons, and, if you're skilled enough to pick these locks, groschen and skill books as well. If you visit here earlier in Act 2, no doubt there'll be something useful to add to your roster of gear, or you can just carry it back above ground to be sold to the various merchants. But now, instead, head down the ladders, and this will take you into an even lower series of mine shafts. Follow this long one straight ahead a fair bit, and then keep straight when it splits off, and you'll find an old barrel containing a pretty long scientific lore book and an astrolabe worth 1800 groschen. Keep exploring because there's definitely more loot to be found in these tunnels, though it's also very easy to get lost. But what if the real free gift of Kingdom Come Deliverance II is the friends we made along the way? Well, in one instance, this is actually true, or it can be, provided you don't drop your noble steed at the earliest opportunity after hearing countless insults be thrown at her from across the street. Pebbles is our horse from the first game, and having survived the attack at Rockwater Pond as well, she'll later turn up in Samin. Barely worth a penny, and in all likelihood still able to be obtained for free, what with being in a condition of scrawny old nag that everyone hates to look at. But in possibly one of the most heartwarming twists of this game, ignoring the insults and lower stats and loyally sticking with Pebbles for many hours and many journeys, one day you'll see the perk Good Old Pebbles unlock in the corner of your screen, with this description to go with it. Pebbles is your loyal companion you were gifted for saving Lord Capon in Rattay, and has been your inseparable companion ever since. You have not heeded the taunts that she excels at nothing, and you have seen good and bad times in her saddle. You have forged a strong bond that nothing can break, and your friendship has awakened in Pebbles the strength and fitness that had long and deeply slumbered within. Now, she can boldly compete with the best horses in noble company. Pebbles' stats are considerably increased, and taking a look, she is now one of the most powerful horses in the entire game. Granted, she doesn't absolutely win in every stat, there's still horses that beat her in one or another, but she is still a strong all-rounder, and the people too will now begin to react to her differently, commenting on how expensive she looks. So if there's one gift you absolutely should hold on to in Kingdom Come Deliverance II, it's the gift horse that is Pebbles. Though with that said, I may still very well put together a worst to best ranking of the horses in the game, depending on how many there actually are, so make sure to subscribe for that. Go check out HelloFresh if you want to appreciate some great food, and as always, a huge thank you to the patrons for going the extra mile to support the channel. Thank you for watching, I hope you learned a useful thing or two or 25. I'm Sam Bram, and I'll see you in the next one.